All right, welcome everybody to today's webinar. I'm Kyle and I'll be moderating today. We're coming up on the halfway point in our Get Profitable series. Today's webinar is how to report on sales by customer. And it's basically about identifying who your most valuable customers are. And Scott Rockins is going to be the presenter today. Go ahead, Scott.
Hello everyone, and thanks for coming today, and thank you, Kyle. So we're going to talk today about how to figure out who your best customers are using System 5 and maybe a little bit about them, and come up with a good list of your best customers, hopefully, so that you can take some actions to find more customers like that or build your business with those customers. Just a little recap on the topics we've covered so far this year, because a lot of these are available to you in different ways. At the beginning of the year, we talked about your top moving items and slow moving items, and on January 18th, and there's a recording of that available. If you're interested in the last workshop, it's also possible to access that either by buying the bundle of workshops we'll talk about today or by purchasing the recording on our website. Today, we're going to talk about how to report on sales by customer and a few different reports that can help you with that. We're going to follow this up with a morning workshop next week from 8 to 12 Pacific on how to encourage those same customers to return to your business more often and get them referring people like them to your business, and some tools in System 5 that can help you do that. We'll follow up in March by talking about how to speed up your sales process and use barcoding in our system. So just a little piece on the workshop here before we get into talking about your customers. This will be next week on the 15th for a half day, and we're going to talk about, once you know who your most valuable customers are, you probably know intuitively, but let's look at specifically who they are. Then what are some strategies you can use in System 5 to help them come back, to encourage them to come back, to encourage them to refer you business, and how can you make sure you have a plan to follow up with them and build that business? So if you're interested in that workshop or any of our workshops, you can now pick those up right here on our website. So you can go to sales.windwardsoftware.com, and you can buy our other professional services catalog items here if you need help with specific things, or under training events right here, you can purchase the different workshops, which we also bundle into groups of 3. And if you missed the last workshop and you'd like to come to it, you can also buy a recording of that event. So now we'll get into the meat and potatoes of this. We're going to talk today about a concept called the customer lifetime value, which is in the software industry, people are always talking about this, but I think it really applies to any business. How much has that customer spent with you over the whole time they've done business with you? And what does that mean? That helps you define what you're losing when you lose a customer and what you're gaining when you get a customer. And it can really help you strategize about ways to find new business or build on the business you have. So really what I'm talking about, how to calculate a customer's lifetime value, it's simply how much they've spent with you. A few ways to estimate it for customers who might be new is, what's their average sale size and how frequently do they purchase? And then you just have to calculate how long you can keep them for. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about overall. First, we're going to go through and look at some key reports that make that easy to find. How do I find what people have spent with me over a period of time or over the whole time they've been with me? And then if I want to zoom in on what that customer relationship is like, how do I filter that by product type? How do I understand their buying behavior, say, by season? Or even invoice by invoice? So first, we're going to talk about a couple different reports that make this easy to find. And you might be familiar with these. So first, I'll show you the ranking sales report. So under reports and under sales reports, there's a few ways to find this report. I think you can find it here under inventory sales reports. Pardon me. There it is. Sorry, under customer invoice sales reports, you can find the ranking sales report. This report's good for a lot of things. One caution though, when I go to the next step, is that this report can take a little bit of time to calculate if you have a large set of data. So you may want to consider either planning to run it after hours or to run it for a shorter time frame. I'm going to run mine for a fairly long time frame. So normally it would look something like this. You'd have to hit this recalculate button, which can take a little time if you have a lot of data. So be wary of that. So I'm looking at 3 years or so here. And I can quickly, once I run that report, filter it by all sorts of things. And today I'm going to quickly filter it by customer. So who's the customer that spent the most with me? And I can sort that by the column headers like you do in Excel. Smith Construction, and pretty profitable, decent margin on that. So maybe I want to focus on that sort of customer and more relationships with builders like that do a lot of volume at a decent margin. Or I could sort this by the profit margin because maybe my strategy is different. I've got enough high volume builders where I've got a lower margin, let's say, and I'm always competing against the store across town. But for sales or customers like Fred Hansen here, I'm making a really good profit margin. So maybe I just want to convince a lot of Fred Hansens to come to my location. The great thing about the ranking sales report is that you can also run all kinds of other reports here really quick. So I'll just touch on that. If I go to category and hit view, I can see which of my categories is doing the best. So for me, it's the refrigerators. So one way to find your customer lifetime value would be to set this over the time frame of this report over your entire time of operating with System 5 and find out who's at the top. It's an easy way to do it, the ranking sales report. However, it doesn't give you a lot of filtering options or ways to focus in on particular customers. A good report for doing that, that's very customizable, is the design your own customer supplier report. So under reports, you look down here under customer supplier reports, you can find a couple canned reports, the mailing list and the phone list. But here you can build your own customer report or supplier report with lots of filters, such as purchase filters. And this is a really great tool to focus in on target customer groups and then come up with a plan to do more business with them. So here you can see off the get-go, I've got a few different toggles. I'm going to use all my locations and I'm going to work on with customers. I could do the similar thing with suppliers. And you can also focus in on types of customers. All of them are just cash customers or account customers. I'm going to do all today. And I'm going to go through the report's more broad features first. So I'm going to skip the filters area to start and just go over to columns here. And this is a lot like the design inventory report. You choose the columns you want to see. So I'm going to put the contact info. I'm not too worried about their address right now. I'm just going to put their phone number and their email, which is right here. Then down a little bit further, I can see the total dollars purchased. So this will just tell you the total they've spent with you, period. After we see this, we'll look at using these filters right below it. You can also do useful things here like, well, maybe what's their current balance? If you're using points, I'm going to talk about points next week as a tool for keeping people coming back. How many points have they accumulated, for example? And I'm just going to hit view here. So we let that run, and then my strategy for today in showing you where to find your customer lifetime value for your largest customers, you'd sort by the total dollars purchased, and they'd be right there. So I can see that Smith Construction is the customer that's driving the most revenue, but I can also see that they still have a lot of that outstanding, and maybe that was recent. So that might be a bit of an outlier. Maybe that business isn't indicative of my whole operation. But this lets you quickly see who's at the top of your list, and then you can zoom in on that customer and think, well, am I trying to get more Smith Constructions in my portfolio of clients, or am I trying to build on my business with Smith Construction, or am I more interested in some of these other clients and having more of those? Now, to enhance or augment this report, you can use these filters here. The first set of filters I'm going to spend a little less time on, but let's suppose I wanted to filter my customers in a certain state or province, in a certain zip code, or if I'm using, say, if I have commissioned salespeople, maybe I want to report by salesperson. You can do that here, and that would open up some doors for looking at your customer base differently. For today's demonstration, I'm going to talk about the purchase filter. So in the purchase filter, I can create filters, and I can give them a name. So I just called this purchase filter number 1, and I'm going to give it a name. I can set certain conditions. So I'm going to take that same report I just looked at and only put customers on it if they meet certain conditions. So I can say, well, if they have greater than $0 purchased, but I could be picking any number here, or greater than or equal to a certain quantity of product. And I can set a date range. I've got my date range set to all time. Then I can pick a product category. So maybe I want to know which customers have spent money on baby goods, because I'm thinking of putting more of that in my showroom, let's say. I can even focus in on a specific product if that's what I want to do, if I'm trying to find out who buys the most of a certain thing. But I'm not going to do that in this example. So to use this purchase filter, I first configure it here on this screen. And then in my columns, I go to here and pick my purchase filter. You'll see as soon as I do that, that the purchase filter is identified here. And now I can run the report. And I'm going to get a much smaller report because it's filtering. Okay, so I've just got Harry Carey here, who's got 4 points. They've purchased the most baby goods. So perhaps it's not a good idea for me to set aside a whole piece of my showroom just for that. But if I need to zoom in on my customers by product type, I can change that out quickly. So let's see, I know that refrigerators in my appliance section is one of my biggest areas of business. So what does the purchase history look like for them? Who are the big players there? So this should help you identify just who your most valuable customers are, which is probably something you know intuitively, and sort of focus in on which segments of your customer base you want to grow. Once you know that, and you maybe take an example of one of these customers, I'm going to use Smith Construction a lot today, you might want to know more about what they're buying and when they're buying it, but without going invoice by invoice. So we're going to look at some other reports that can help you figure that out. Now, one other key thing you can do on the report I'm showing you now is you can use it to either filter by lookup words or add lookup words. So actually, before I move on, I'm just going to point this tab out on the report. This would allow me to filter the report. So for example, only the people with a lookup word attached of builder would be on the report. Or if I want to add a lookup word, say I want to be, add a lookup word of top customer to everyone on a report. I could add that lookup word to each person that's on the report after I put the filters on. This would be a quick way of flagging all those customers that I want to take actions with down the road. Now we'll look at a little bit of how to dive into when your customer is purchasing. So you might want to know, well, do I have customers who are seasonal, or do they spend more at certain times of year? And the customer yearly sales report is helpful with that. So I'm going to go to customer and supplier, or sorry, to sales reports, and then to customer and invoice sales reports here. And I'm going to go customer yearly sales. I think this report works best if you pick a customer, like I'm going to do here. But you notice I can also filter customers by a lookup word. And now I can see when it is in the year that this customer is purchasing. So that might just give you an idea of when you could take an action to get them to pre-order. So it's not a scramble for you to have everything they need. Maybe you need to phone them in late April or early May to make sure that you can fulfill their June orders, for example. So you can look into things like that. For example, in power sports, I know that a lot of our power sports customers will often go to their vendors and get a deal, and they call it a spring booking. Well, maybe you can do the same thing. Either blow out stock that's been sitting all winter, or bring in new inventory with the purpose of selling it to specific customers, your top customers. I'd also say you probably want a report that can show you the details of that customer's business invoice by invoice. Now, this is a little bit gritty. It's going to be useful for certain things. And it's similar to the invoice reporting, except that it allows you to filter it by customer first. So this one here, I can pick a range of customers, which I'll do here. I'll run it on everybody, and I can pick a time frame. I'm going to go back a few months. And there's quite a few little tools here to edit what you want to include. So maybe you want to include estimates, maybe you don't, for example. And you can put a specific customer in here, or you can do a range. So I'll do a range to start. Now I can see the customers it's going to report on and the number of invoices each one has. And then I can run the report, and I can flip through the different customers and see what they've purchased. So this kind of brings it all together. You could go to the customer record and open each one, and an invoice report would do this across customers for a given date. But if you just look through this and you think, well, Smith Construction, they're a little bit all over the place. They're buying flooring, they're buying dress pants and freezers. But you can find some method to the madness of when your customers buy and what they're buying. If that's too gritty, if that's too line by line and too many invoices to look through, we can also just look at what they're buying by product category or product group. So the category sales by customer is also a useful report. And this breaks it down just like you can see on screen here. Which product categories is this customer spending money on? And maybe that helps me identify where I'd like to grow my relationship with the customer. Or maybe it helps me identify areas where we could just sell more of that product to them. That product's clearly what's bringing them in the door. Just a little more information about their purchase behavior, what we're looking for here. So we'll go back to to sales reports, sorry. Sales reports, and then we're gonna go to category sales by customer. Now, I suspect this one might get a little bit squirrely on me here, but it's a good report. So I'm gonna run this here, and you can see I've got a little bit of a problem I've run into. I just wanted to show you that we all run into problems. So the headers are getting a little juggled up, but this report helps you identify which areas the customer is spending money. And if I do this, I can do it for all customers. And it's not the only report that does that for all customers, but I think really the power of this one here would be to do it for a specific customer or for all customers linked to a specific salesperson. For example, maybe you've got a salesperson who's always selling the same things and not cross-selling important things. This could be a way to identify that sort of behavior. And it can help you get a little more data about the customer and what they're buying, when they're buying, and that sort of thing. I think of all these reports, the one that has the most value to you in figuring out more about who your best customers are, how long they stay with you, how much money that's worth to your business, is probably the customer supplier reports, because you can customize it so much. You can filter that in different ways, flag your customers with lookup words so that you can take other actions. And the whole idea of a customer's lifetime value is to think past the one transaction you've had with them, even if you have a long purchasing cycle. So my story about this is simple. I bought a new hot water tank in the fall. Sorry, heater, not hot water tank. And one thing that the company did that closed the deal, they did 25 years ago when someone built this house. I didn't even own it. They put a tag with the salesperson's name and phone number on the heater. And because of that plan that they had to follow up, which they'd probably forgotten all about, the same salesperson came back to our house from 25 years earlier. And because he walked into our house and he's like, oh, I remember this place. That gave us a ton of comfort, and they won the business without even any effort at all. So it might not even be the same customer, but you want to start thinking about what strategies am I putting in place to bring that customer back to sell another product like that. And if you can dig through your data in System 5, you can find the right people to focus on. What we're going to focus on in the workshop coming up is what are you going to do once you find them and you know a bit about them. So here's some self-help resources that relate to what I'm talking about. Really, this is all reporting. What we're going to get into next time has more to do with what you could do once you've kind of found the people you want to do more business with, or less business with. How do I target these customers, and what are some tools in System 5 that I can put in place to help me grow my business this year? I did actually want to ask, though, if people look at this the same way as I'm looking at it. So just let me quickly send you a poll. So first of all, is this something you think about? How much you make from a customer during the time they do business with you? I didn't quite get all of you, but I've got a few questions. So surprisingly, not everyone thinks that way. And it's kind of a software approach to tracking your customers. So I'm not surprised. That's where the idea came from. But I think it applies to all of us. So whether you do or you do not, do you have a plan to increase that number that people typically spend with you this year?
And Scott, I think a lot of people think about this in a way of average basket instead of just average or total lifetime value. But each of those incremental changes in the average basket contributes to this. So
yeah, the average sale as opposed to the frequency, right? So this is, I'm just interested to hear what. So it's an interesting cross section. Yes and no. It's still early in the year. It's not too late to make a good plan. Whether that's for, like Kyle says, your average basket or the overall experience for the customer. And I think those are the other two questions I have are maybe less applicable. So from here, I think I'd love to encourage you to come to the workshop next week because we're going to talk about tactics and strategies you can use to focus on these customers once you've identified them. So hopefully we'll see you there. Kyle, did you want to take it from there?
yeah, sure. Throw up that next slide. He already showed you this once, but we're gonna go in for the sell here. We got the morning workshop coming up. It is next Thursday, so it's a half day. It's 8 to 12, and the event is part of a 3-part series about becoming more profitable. So the topics in this one are pricing. Oh, I got the wrong information there. Upselling of kits, using kits, modifiers, and comments, using gift cards to your advantage. So also, we have an entire points loyalty program within the system, and he's going to go over that as well. And then adding up follow-ups or service using the CRM. And then, like I said, again, this is part of a package. Can you throw up the next slide there, Scott? It's part of our Get Profitable bundle. So if you do get all of them together, they are priced together. Now, obviously, we've already held one of those, so you would get the recording of how to optimize your pricing and keep your costing up to date. That was from January 22nd. And then next week's is how to encourage return visits and referrals. And then the last one is kind of like a miniaturized version of barcoding in your business, which we sell as part of our professional services packages. You can get a group version of that on 321. And if you go to sales.windwardsoftware.com or windwardsoftware.com/events, you can get that price there because we did reduce the price since you'll just be getting a recording of the first one. All right, Scott, I didn't notice if there were any questions. You must have done such a great job that there weren't very many.
I think we've got one.
Perfect.
So let's, this is a good question from Christine. So let me just share that. So Christine's asking, how do you add lookup words to the lookup word list? And how do you add lookup words to your customers or suppliers? So Christine, I'm going to show the basic way to do that. And there's more on this in your Learning Academy. So if I go into a customer or a supplier, I'll go into my customer records though, and I'll just pick somebody. So let's pick I don't know, Mary Smith. And I go to the lookup words tab. This is where I'm going to be able to add new lookup words and assign them to this client. So if I want to add one, I'm drawing a blank here, so I'm just going to do this. It's a happy customer. I can type what I want to call the lookup word here, and I hit add. Now that created the lookup word for later use, and it attached it to Mary Smith. I can detach it like that. Maybe Mary Smith is a builder. I can attach that one. Mary Smith can also have both, or I can move them all off. And my only caution with this is there is such a thing as too many lookup words. We've been using System 5 at Windward Software Systems for a very long time, and we have a great deal of lookup words. And then it can become a long,
yeah,
it can get to be too much. So just make them make sense and make them be reusable would be my advice. And it looks like this is a follow-up question. Can you show a sales report for each customer by product and the price for each product? So you want to see all the people that bought a certain thing, David? Is that correct? Yeah, I think actually you could do that in more than one way, David. So I could use this same report that I think, the design your customer supplier report, but in my filter, I would use this bottom thing, purchased inventory. So I think I might need to take the column off. So say I go name, and we'll do filter 1 under purchase filters. We'll set it greater than or equal to 0. And so you need these two in place before these light up. And then instead of doing a category, which is what I did, you can go right into an item and pick something specific.
We may
That's
come
how
up
you
with
could
0 on that, but
yeah, I don't have enough data here to really do a great example of that. So that's one way. It's build it into this report with the filter. And I think maybe a better way for me to show you something that I'll get some report results on might be to go to the sales reports area, and is it this one, category sales, or is it this one? One of these has an item, not that one. Bear with me a moment. I thought what this one did, but no. Of course, the other way here would be this, pull up your item. Let's do refrigerator. Can't say I know which one of these I sold a lot of, but I'm gonna guess that one. And go to the sales history report.
yeah,
If
that
it's
sales
really about
history
one product,
report is really useful if you're just trying to figure out how much you sold on one specific item.
yeah, this is probably the way to go. So you come in here to sales history, you pick your toggles, watch for that one, the work orders, because sometimes a lot of your stuff is still sitting on a work order or quote. Pick your date range, and it's going to tell you exactly which invoice it's on, and the pricing, which I think is what you're looking for, David. Is that? Answer your question? Awesome.
Perfect. You know, Scott, while we were just kind of going through that, I thought it was interesting that you could create the lookup words and attach them using the design customer supplier report. I never knew you could do that. And then it looked like some of the other reports used those lookup words as part of their function. So it's interesting how you can really get granular on how you report on these things by using
Yeah,
multiple reports.
yeah. It's how you can target and segment your customers or your products or your vendors or your invoices specifically. The lookup words is really powerful. I could probably do a whole hour on it, but it's also kind of simple. So reports like the one that you just mentioned, Kyle, I think they're quite powerful because of that area. This is what Kyle was talking about. I can, add the builder lookup word to everything on the report, or filter it, or exclude people from it. or remove or add lookup words using these toggles down here. And then those become search terms that you can use elsewhere. Very handy. And yeah, we don't have any other questions today, but does anyone else have anything lingering they wanted to ask before we let you go?
Right. Well, I think that'll cover it then.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming.
We'll see you next week, hopefully.
Yeah. Take care.